Okay, we're now going to look at property in Spain and how you find your dream home and the practicalities of buying it. We have initially a panel of agents that deal with the different areas of Spain.
Got here Jason Wild of Marbella Connections, Nigel Salmon of Girasol Homes, and Joanne Alderton of Alderton. Welcome, all of you.
Morning.
Thanks for inviting us. Thank you for having us.
All right. Well, good to see you. First of all, I guess the opening question really is, how do people start to go about finding their home in Spain? And Joanne, perhaps you could just sort of give a little overview of how people should approach it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's really important is that people realise that looking for property and purchasing property in Spain is a very different process to the UK market, not least because most of the clients and most of the people looking for property are actually looking online from their homes in the UK and are studying areas many times that they've never even visited. So the first most fundamental point that people need to do is invest time in searching for the correct agent to work with, because you want to make that connection, you want to establish that relationship so that you're giving all your information just to one person. They can then feed it out to other people on your behalf, but they can act as your barrier and they can act as your, essentially your concierge service over here to pull in everything that's going to suit you, and you're investing that time in finding out exactly about each other. So it's imperative that you just choose one agent to work with rather than 5, 6, 7 or 100. In my area alone here, there's 1,000 agents in the area that we work with. So it's a minefield out there. So you need someone that's going to work on your behalf.
Nigel, how do you sort of see your role in helping people to?
Similar to Joanne's. I mean, it's we've been around for over 12 years, and effectively experience counts. There's a lot of people who have set up in the last sort of 2 or 3 years as the market's got better, who have sort of come over as a buyer in many cases and sort of set up a sort of an operation which is small scale. There's a lot of help we can give to people, and I guess the internet is our friend and our enemy in many cases, because you know, you can spend many years watching a place in the sun, which is useful for us. I mean, it puts us on the map, but effectively it might not be the best way, and that's generally not how people buy houses with the television presenter. So generally it comes down to a fairly forensic interview with the client, if we can get there, and effectively to keep them on track. And that's not a control thing, it's basically common sense, because you know, if you've never been to an area, yes, you've got to come out and have a look at it, but the actual research that somebody does on the internet back home versus the amount of time that they actually give us to spend with them before they come out is the wrong equation. It needs to be much more of this sort of conversation, rather than sort of looking at maybe out-of-date websites, stuff that looks too good to be true, and all the things. And I understand it's basically you've got to work with the right people, and I think, you know, I speak for all the panelists here that we've got a wealth of experience to help people with. So you've got to open up, whether you're looking for a second home, retirement, relocation, weekend getaway, whatever it might be. And it will come down to obviously a set of questions that we will ask you to help you.
So, Jason, I mean, I certainly hear people say that it's good to work with a large number of agents because that gives you different perspectives and start. Whereas I think the general view here will be that it's best to deal with one agent. The sort of approach that you take.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, our role, as the other two have already said, really, it's about building a rapport and an understanding with a potential buyer. If you can understand what it is they're looking for, then we can advise better by shopping online. That shopping online mentality doesn't really bear great dividends. It can be often quite frustrating. Property is always selling quite quickly, and they're not always updated. It's not always possible to keep listings as up to date as possible. But you know, especially in today's climate where things are listed, you've got a rapport with the vendor as well. Certain prices might not be advertised as being available at below market value, but if you're dealing with an agent that you've expressed clearly what it is you're looking for, you can then be guided in a way that you know, we can introduce these buyers to the right deals in the right areas and at the right price. That's really it's a marriage in effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we also saw from the statistics in terms of people here that you know, a reasonable number of people are looking at renting before they're buying. What do you see are the pros and cons of that? Joanne, would you like to?
Was that to me? Sorry, Nigel, I couldn't hear you very well. Yeah, yeah. I mean, renting before you buy, it's a great idea, and on paper, it's an even better idea. But in reality, you have to be realistic about the areas that you're looking in. The majority of people that are looking, as we see on your breakdown, are looking around the Costas. Now, the Costas are led by tourism, which means that the majority of properties that are for rent are for short-term rentals only, maybe 6 months, etc. in the wintertime. There's not a lot of property available for 12 months, etc. So it's a very finite market. Yes, come over in the wintertime because it's always good to experience the surroundings and what the lifestyle is like outside of the summer season, but be prepared to use that time wisely whilst you're renting to actually actively look for the property that you want to buy. It's just renting to buy is great, but it's not, don't put all your eggs in that one basket. Be realistic about what's out there.
Nigel or Jason, did you have anything to add to that?
It doesn't. It's not so common here. People will probably come out on multiple trips. Let's say 2 or 3 trips for maybe a week at a time or something. So I think that's experience what people do. So it's as Joanne says, you've got to find the right rental. And the thing is, what people tend to do is they normally come out and basically find something a bit quicker than they think they're going to find something, you know. And again, that's to how we do, as well as obviously testament to you know, their own personal opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So perhaps we could move on to the sort of market. What impact has COVID-19 had, and where do we see the market going over the next few months? Perhaps Jason, if you could give us your view, then we'll ask the others to follow on.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's had a direct impact in the fact that the freedom of movement has been impacted. The number of viewings and therefore sales without seeing the property is always unlikely to get sold. So agents have been running around videoing everything they have on their books, but it's very rare for a buyer to commit on that basis. So, you know, it's impacted sales, but on the flip side, there's been no sort of decrease in interest. People have more time on their hands at home. So, you know, maybe a lot of it is curiosity, but the clients I've spoken to via Zoom or audio calls are adamant that once things lift, they will be looking to travel to Spain and commit to buying. So, you know, the signs are still good. You know, they simply had enough of life in the UK, and with Brexit now obviously official, they want a fresh start, and we're better than Spain.
And so, in terms of the prices, is that sort of reflected in prices?
Well, we can't speak for Spain as a whole, but I know in previous times of crises, prices have fallen as much as sort of 30% in some parts of the country. But demand for the Costa del Sol, which is obviously where I'm based, as a tourist destination, is strong, even in current climate. So, it's a place that people have been flocking to since the 60s, and it won't change anytime soon, I don't think. Demand is still outweighing supply, which means, prices hold strong for longer.
So, Nigel, what's your view on prices and how they're likely to change?
It's probably a little bit early to say. I haven't seen it being impacted yet. Back to the COVID question, effectively, our sort of spring has now become our summer. Now, obviously, it's been slightly delayed again because obviously some quarantine restrictions which came in over the weekend. We've still got people coming out, and I think the people who haven't got jobs, who are maybe retired or basically looking at the bigger picture, they're still coming. But obviously we've lost some along the way who are employed, and obviously that would probably break the back of their employer. But it's too early to say. And I think the thing is, if you're in popular locations, in good locations, you're going to be less impacted by price reductions. But if you're buying something in the middle of nowhere, which is still in the middle of nowhere, and there's no shops, restaurants, anything, then basically you're going to have an issue. We wouldn't recommend you buy something like that unless that's where you wanted to be, and you had to buy it because you've only got a small budget or whatever it might be. But we would point out the pitfalls of that as well. So I don't, if this continues for another 6 months as it is, with travel restrictions, well, then it might be a factor. But at the moment, I don't think that's the case.
Jason, we'll start with the other end of the country. Start with Costa del Sol. Could you talk us through the sort of popular areas in the Costa del Sol and the problems? Okay.
Well, the Costa del Sol is a stretch of 165 kilometres on the south coast of Spain. The main municipalities consist of Malaga, the capital, the city centre, into Torremolinos, Benalmádena, then Fuengirola, Mijas, Marbella, Benavís, Estepona, Casares, which includes Duquesa, Manilva through to San Roque and Sotogrande, which is up near Gibraltar. So that's kind of the width of coastline. The most popular areas, I guess, within those, and this is probably going to come up in conversation, but Malaga Centre, it's a relatively unknown city, but I mean it's steeped in history. It's going back into the 18th century when the Phoenicians and Romans were first settled there. It's got a historic old town. There's castles, there's Roman ruins, there's a cathedral, there's the Picasso Museum. There's a port that's just been revamped. There's the beaches, of course. There's good shopping areas, and the food and drink. It's typical of the area. Coming then sort of east away from the airport, you've got the costas, local costas, which is Benalmádena and Mijas. Benalmádena is popular because of its long promenades. It's got the boating marina, so it attracts visitors that way. Mijas is known for its white wall village and golf courses, and also you've got the popular fishing village of La Calida Mijas, which draws a lot of interest in itself. Marbella, then, that's a brand. People say they've got a place in Marbella, but I'm afraid it doesn't hold the postcode. And many will not go anywhere else. If money's no object, it does come at a premium. It does have it's known for its high-end luxury side of things with Nueva Andalucía, Puerto Banús. But Marbella, the town, is actually quite understated. It's a low-key. It's still full of local residents. I lived in the old town for 9 odd years. It's very, very charming. It still maintains its Spanish heritage, if you like. But this is the postcode many aspire to, but often they end up elsewhere. One such area for that would be Benavís. It's got a great village. It's a very well-run municipality. It boasts many fantastic golf courses, and it's been the go-to destination for a lot of new arrivals in the last 10 years, I'd say, where Marbella was considered unsuitable. And then developing on from there, another area that's seen a spike in interest is Estepona. In recent years, this is partly really down to the bus route, which has been expanded from Malaga Airport, and the area there's vast amounts of money that's been invested in there. So you've got, they've really tried to kind of attract the tourist and make the destination more appealing to the foreign investor. They've got new sports facilities in town. They've completely redone the relaying the beach promenade, pedestrianised the old town. They've revamped the boating marina. You know, there's been a lot of changes across the whole area. And then the areas of Casares, Manilva, heading down towards Sota Grande are areas of real boom. There's a lot of investment heading out that way now. So there's a fair stretch of coast there, but you know, with the way that we operate, with you know, not all of the listings we deal with are our own. We have access to 8,000 resales. We've got over 250 to 300 new build developments. So you know, we've got a good collaboration covering all that area with what people need.
Okay, well, thanks for that. And perhaps now if we could move on to Nigel and the area that you cover, which is the...
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Nigel. And thanks, Jason. That's a really good synopsis of your area. Excellent. Yeah, really good. We cover generally south of Alicante Airport, right down to past La Manga Club and La Manga Strip, probably down to the Almeria border, so places like Aguillas as well. Areas that people might have heard of are places like Torrevieja, Cabaroi, Calazenia, and basically there's more into the Murcia region. You've got San Pedro del Pinatar, Lopagan, San Javier. This area here is the sort of southeast corner of Spain, so it's really known for its excellent weather, and winter is very, very good here. Generally, if I go out in December, it's probably about 18 to 20 degrees during the day, and I'll probably need a jumper at night. But it's pretty good. Doesn't rain a huge amount here. When it does, it's pretty dramatic, but generally the stats are about 320 days of sunshine a year, which is what all the tourism boards promote here. And generally you've got sort of a mix between typical Spanish and also obviously you've got sort of more built up expat areas here. So you sort of pays your money as you take your choice. We can show you any of that if that's what you want. So quite varied. I mean, we've still got properties here, sort of 50, 60,000 euros, right up to the sort of, you know, early millions. There's some really nice resorts. There's La Manga Club. There's Las Colinas Golf and Country Club Resort here. There's La Finca Golf and Country Club Resort, which is a little bit further north of us here. You can go inland if you want. Again, it depends on the type of purchaser you are. You know, there's fincas and farms, the bits and pieces like that. It can get very, very hot in the summer. And obviously, the sort of further northwest as we go here, we've got the Alto Plano where they grow the wine in Almeria, that sort of area as well. And there's sort of, you've got places like Caravaca de la Cruz, where effectively it's a very holy place. They do this sort of famous pudding rice there as well. So I guess there's something for everybody. You know, but generally a lot of people come here because it's generally pretty affordable compared to some other places in Spain. It's very easily communicated. You've got Alicante Airport, you've got the new airport of Corbera in Murcia, and generally a lot of people drive now as well. If they've got pets, they bring the dog down, and, you know, so it takes probably a couple of days to get down from the UK. So something for everybody. It's very well communicated. It's very established as well. And generally, a lot of people who buy here have maybe their mum and dad have had a house, they've come on holiday here, whatever it might be. So again, something for everybody, I guess.
Well, thanks very much, Nigel. And Joanne, you'll cover the northern Costa Blanca, so perhaps you could explain a bit about that.
Yeah. Again, I'm worried about the background noise, I apologise. Yeah, so whereas Nigel flies into Alicante and turns left, if you come in to see me, you'll fly into Alicante and turn right. And I cover the whole of the northern Costa Blanca. So a lot of people think that the Costa Blanca North is Benidorm, and that's so far removed from the truth, it's unreal. We cover some spectacular areas here. There's mountains, there's coves, there's rocky caves. It's absolutely gorgeous. Some of the areas that people might have heard of, places like Altea, Denia, Moraira, Javier, Gandia, Oliva, So yeah, it's a very green area where we are. We have beautiful white sandy beaches, and we also have rocky coves, so something for everybody. It's particularly huge, our area, with the gastronomy tourism. It's the home of paella. It's also the home, Calpe, for example, has 3 Michelin-starred restaurants just in the town alone. So it actually holds the accolade of having the most Michelin-starred restaurants of anywhere in Europe in one town. So it's becoming a massive tourism business over here. And then we also have the Halon Valley, which is somewhere that I really like to take people and show them, because it's magnificently spectacular. It's the home of wine. So we do a little wine tasting when you come out with us as well. Why not? We're here to enjoy ourselves. And it's all about showing you this area. When you come out here, get rid of your preconceived ideas of Benidorm, because it's not Benidorm at all. It's so much more.
Okay, thank you all. So one of the debates that we often hear is about whether to live, by the coast or further inland. What's the advice you give on that, Nigel? Do you want to?
Well, it just depends on. I guess if you're from a small flat in a city, and you see a great big finca with 20,000 square meters of land, you might be a bit hooked on that, because it's completely different as well. But again, you've got to do your research. If you're isolated in the middle of nowhere, and you like going and seeing people and bars and restaurants and being super convenient, then probably that's not for you. But they will be probably a bit cheaper. I mean, we've got some really good options, and obviously a lot of people are sort of looking at sort of lockdown properties. They want to have their own pool, they want to be private. That's their dream villa. House, pool, big garden, palm trees, the whole lot. So you can get it. And as I said earlier, I mean, if you go quite a lot inland, you're going to have pretty good aircon. And it will be pretty hot inland. There's not going to be much of a breeze. Obviously on the coast, well, obviously we've all got coastal areas that we're talking about here. You'll have a breeze and you'll be well communicated, but the house will be much smaller, or it might be an apartment. So again, there's pros and cons. I guess if you're living out here full time and you've got a finca or a country house and you can see your neighbours dotted around, then that probably could, and you're within reasonable reach of a decent town, then that could be a good move for you. Again, just depends on your circumstances as well. If you're social gregarious, you want to be playing golf all the time and bowls or whatever, or basically cricket maybe, you're going to need to be closer to civilization. So again, it just depends on how far inland you want to be. I mean, we've got, where we are here, we're sort of bordered by mountains, which makes the actual area, a very fertile plain, and effectively there's a lot of properties sort of over the mountains and that sort of area. There's a very, very different area to what we normally deal with. So we can help, but again, just want to ask the client whether they want to be isolated, which they could be.
Okay, so Jason, is the sort of view fairly similar down in the Costa del Sol, or?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously does depend on what people want, but in fairness, we've got urban land up to sort of 10 kilometres inland. I mean, obviously the finca style property, obviously you get more for your money in terms of housing. There's larger outdoor space. Many come with a lot of land, but the downside is typically that you're limited to the type of property. It would be like almost like a farmland dwelling. These are not always the best quality build. Many started out as cattle sheds and they've stuck some windows in and gone, hey, look, a house. So the main consideration on top of that is the infrastructure. It's not being as good. Many don't have mains water. They rely on wells, sanitation, and that needs to be emptied by yourself. Mains electric isn't always as stable. The distance of things, a decent shop or a supermarket, accessibility, generally, it's a far cry from the comforts of home that people are typically used to. And the other consideration is that, you know, these properties are often not as they seem. Just because they've got the doors and the windows doesn't mean that they're actually official residences for living in. You know, there's many different types of finca property, and you really need to be talking to someone who knows the difference. You know, you need to be careful before committing to buying, get a lawyer involved. And as Nigel has already said, one important point is, you know, the further inland you go from the coast, the hotter it gets in the summer and the colder it is at night in the winter. So, you know, I mean, I play cricket 40 kilometres inland from the coast, and it can be 34, 35 on the coast, on the beach, and I'll drive up there and it's 45. So in the summer, it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And in the northern Costa Blanca, Joanne, how many? I mean, there are various places that are, you know, heavily populated, shall we say, by expats and so on, and some areas are rather more sort of Spanish. Do you find people looking for one rather more than the other, or what's the experience?
Yeah, I think initially when we first meet people and we have our initial conversations with people, most people seem to be looking for a villa or an apartment or a townhouse within striking distance of the resort or the coast, within striking distance of bars, restaurants. But this is where it goes back to right at the beginning of our webinar, where we talk about investing in the agent who's going to speak to you and find out about you, and then we'll match a town or an area to your actual requirements rather than just looking at properties online. For example, here, most people come out to me and want to look in Javier or Marbella because they're very, very popular areas around here. And in reality, when we do orientations, I take them to the Halon Valley, which is 20 minutes inland. It's about 30 kilometres inland. It is stunning, and a lot of people, I'd say maybe over 60% of the clients we bring out here will end up purchasing in that area because it's an area they haven't really considered, but once they're there, they love it. So it's about, you have to invest that time to get out with myself, with Jason, with Nigel, and spend the time in these areas, getting to know them, scratch beneath the surface, and let us show you the areas and let us build a relationship with you so that we can basically get to know you and then say, we're like matchmakers. You know, it's a great pairing, you know, and it's like a fine wine.
Okay. Well, thank you all. I think we'll now sort of move on to the practicalities of the buying process. And so, thank you very much. And we'll take us through that. And obviously, people can contact me if they want to get in contact with any of you to find out a little bit more about.
Happy to help.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Speak later on the Q&A.
Right. So, Alex.
Hi, Nigel, I can hear you.
Yep. So, right. So, now we'll move on to having sort of found the property. It's then a question of sort of going through the process. And I just wondering if you talk people through how it varies from what they may be used to in the UK or elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the UK, if you buy a property, you'd instruct your own lawyer. You wouldn't leave it to an estate agent to manage the conveyancing process. Sometimes agents across Spain will try and encourage buyers to maybe use them as a conveyancer because they know the process and familiar with it. But I'd always recommend that you instruct an independent lawyer. That independent lawyer confirms their costs in writing to you, and also the overall cost of the purchase. Because depending on where you buy in Spain, Nigel, you've had 3 established estate agents there talk about their different areas. The costs vary, and the costs vary also whether you buy a brand new property or a second-hand property. So, for example, in Spain, when you buy a property, you pay what's known as transfer tax, purchase property tax, and basically in the Valencian region, which includes Alicante, it's 10%. Catalonia, it's 10% as well. You move down the coast to Murcia and Andalusia, and that's 8%. So as part of finding that perfect property, is also important, I think, to bear in mind budget and that's something that people can do before, something to consider before buying. But I'd allow basically between 12 and 14% on top of the purchase price to purchase a property. And if you're buying a brand new property, you're going to pay 10% VAT, IVA in Spain, and you'll also pay stamp duty at 1.5%. So the cost there then could go up to 15%.
Great. And, in terms of the way that the property purchase process works, is it very similar in terms of offer acceptance and then going through to exchange contracts and completion as you would see in the UK, or is it rather different?
Yeah, but basically, Nigel, so before we even get to that stage, I think it's very important that if people are looking at coming to move out to Spain, either to live or to buy a property, that they consider carefully the regions, the towns, the buying cost. If they're going to apply for a mortgage, I'd say contact an independent mortgage broker to find out from them how much you can borrow. Typically in Spain, banks will lend up to 65 or 70% of the value. And if you're looking at costs of 12, 14% on top, you're going to need a deposit of at least 45%. So I think before you come out to Spain, it's important to kind of look at those figures. And also think about whether or not it's going to be a holiday home or it's going to be a house for you to live in. Because if it's a holiday home, then you probably want less maintenance and you want to be able to arrive at the property fairly quickly. So typically you're looking at a property within an hour of an airport. And bear in mind the main airports, I'm talking Barcelona, Alicante and Malaga would service the holiday areas. And then there are other airports along there as well, but less frequent flights. So I think, do your homework first, then also think about who's going to own it, who's paying for it. So if it's a married couple, obviously they probably buy in their joint names. But if for example it was an unmarried couple or someone with more liquidity than the other one, then you can actually change the ownership. So if I was buying a property with someone and I was putting 75% of the value in and they were putting 25% in, then we can own at the land registry 75, 25% each. So just consider who's going to own it. And also, Nigel, we come across clients, elderly clients, just about or have retired or got some money behind them and they want to buy a Spanish property and they want that to kind of flow through the generations to their children and grandchildren. They can actually purchase the property in their children's names. So the children, so long as they're over the age of 18, could own the property. They would be the legal owners of the property, and the parents could actually be the life interest. They could be the owners of the life interest in that property. So there's various ownership options to consider. Obviously, if you do go down that route, then you've got to have a very important, I'd say, family conversation and talk about what happens if your child was to get divorced and you'd paid for that property. To make it clear, an uncomfortable conversation with a potential new son or daughter-in-law about who would get what in the event of divorce, and obviously debt or a death. So a Spanish will would cover that off. So those are the things I think you've got to consider before buying a property. And then really, start looking for a property. So talk to the agents we've just seen. They cover broad areas of Spain. Start talking to an agent once you've found the region and the town that you're interested in. Joanne was mentioning there the Jalón Valley. I have active clients buying there. It's a really nice area. Calpe is quite stunning. And then I live in Marbella at the moment. I've lived on the other side of the Costa del Sol. So I know Spain quite well. We travel to the islands for our holiday. So the Canaries and Balearics, also great area. So there is something for everyone in Spain, and it's just a question, I think, of getting out there and feeling it, and then once you're comfortable, then making the move. The first step, I would say, is consider appointing independent lawyers. So typically we put powers of attorney in place for clients. We're doing that quite a lot at the moment. People are looking to come out to Spain in September, October. So we're putting powers of attorney in place. that's an important document that authorises us to act for you in Spain to buy a Spanish property. But in the meantime, until you find a property, we can apply for your Spanish tax number, which is known as an NIE number. That doesn't mean you become a Spanish tax resident, it just means that you've got an NIE number and that you can pay tax in Spain when you buy a property. So consider appointing an independent lawyer, opening a bank account, speaking to local agents, and also opening an account with a FX company. So I think those Nigel, are the things to do, to consider before buying, and what you can do before you've even found a property.
So once you've got there, one of the things that people hear about are the sort of problems with Spanish property, legal developments and things like that. Obviously, having an independent lawyer is an important factor in that, but is it much similar to completely searches that you would see in the UK to make sure that is that the main role of the big lawyer?
So basically, yeah, the conveyancing process is generally similar in that there's an offer, there's an acceptance, and then searches will be carried out, due diligence carried out. Lawyers will report back to their clients, and assuming everything's happy, then the contracts will be exchanged, and then you complete. But in Spain, it's slightly different in that here we've got the position of the notary. So basically, it's a lawyer who's continued to study and has been appointed a notary, passed the notarial exams, and then they've been given a position as a notary in the local town. And basically, all official documents such as purchases of property, sales of property, Spanish will, company incorporation, or an inheritance have to be signed before a notary. And a notary is there to protect both parties, to make sure that that basically if you're going to buy a property, the property that you are buying is the property that the seller is selling, and they'll carry out searches. But basically, Nigel, so from the UK perspective, what we also find is that in comparison to the UK, Spanish property purchases can take a lot less time. We don't tend to have chains in Spain, so once you've found a property, you can complete within as quickly as 4 weeks. On average, I'd say allow between 4 and 12 weeks to complete. And many clients contact us, Nigel, when they're actually with the agent, and they say, look, Alex, I found a property. The agent's asked us to pay some money over and look at, and sign a reservation contract. If it's okay if I send it over to you, and I'd certainly encourage that. So I'd like to see that reservation contract. If you've got a mortgage, then we need to subject that reservation contract to the mortgage. If you want a survey, then that reservation contract should also be subject to survey. And we typically insert in a reservation contract kind of all-encompassing clause, which would basically be for example, a statement from the seller that the property is fully legal, that the property is fully legal, it's all registered at the land registry, it has its license of first occupation, which means that the town hall inspected the property once it had been built and confirmed it had been built according to that planning permission, and they issued that planning permission. And then with that license of first occupation, sorry, not the planning permission, the town hall issued the license of first occupation, and you can then connect to the mains, water, and electric. So we would basically put in that clause, and once that clause has been put in, and you've put in there, for example, typically you pay between 3,000 and 6,000 euros to take the property off the market, and then you would the exchange contracts about 3 or 4 weeks later, and then completion would be at a future date. Mortgages are taking a little bit longer to obtain, so if you are applying for a mortgage, I would allow at least up to 2 months to complete.
Right. Okay. And what are the main issues that you tend to see coming from those searches? I mean, I think you've mentioned many of them, but which do you see as the ones that cause the problems the most often, or that raise issues?
So typically, once the reservation contract is signed, we would contact the agent or the seller's lawyer and we would ask for the property documents. So we want to see the deed of purchase, we want to see if there's a license of first occupation, we want to see water receipts, electric receipts, and if the property is on a community of owners, we ask for minutes of the community minutes for the last 3 years, because if you're buying a so another, I suppose, difference between the UK and Spain is that in Spain you only buy freehold. There's no leasehold unless you're buying a kind of commercial premises. But buy and behold, if you're buying a residential property, it will be freehold. But for example, if you buy an apartment or a townhouse, that may be on a community of owners, which means you own the property freehold, and then you become a shareholder in the community of owners. And that basically means that you have to contribute monthly costs to the community, and you have a say in how the community is run. Usually the community is run by a professional administrator and a president, which tends to be appointed by one of the owners, by the owners committee. So basically, we see that, get those documents in, Nigel. We apply for land searches in English and Spanish. I think it's amazing that the Spanish Land Registry issues those in English and Spanish. And then we compare all the paperwork we've got. So it's very important, if you're intending to rent the property, that, for example, for holiday rentals, that you have a license of first occupation in place. If you're intending to rent it long term, then it's not necessary to have that license of first occupation, although it's a good document to have. And if you're, for example, buying in the Canaries, then when you purchase a property there, the property has to have what's known as a touristic license, a licencia turística. So it's very difficult to get one of those in the Canaries, and also the Balearics, if you don't buy a property with those licenses already in place. Typically, we carry out our searches, Nigel, and sometimes we come across, for example, a pool hasn't been registered, or someone completed an extension and that hasn't been registered. So we basically ask the seller for more information about that. We'd ask if they applied for licenses, for example, to add the pool or the extension. And if they hadn't, then we'd consider the legal situation. Generally speaking, though, if an extension has been built or added to a property and more than 6 months have elapsed and the town hall hasn't taken any action against the owners, then the seller can add that to the deed, so long as it's not on protected land. So we would ask them to go through that process before or at completion, and we withhold the costs of them to do that. So they would sign a deed declaring those buildings. The costs of registration and the taxes involved we would hold back from the purchase monies, and then we could sign the deed of completion. Those I'd say, those are the main issues. So in Andalusia, sometimes also we have what's known as a DAFO. A DAFO basically means that the property may have been extended or didn't have planning permission originally, and retrospective planning permission can be obtained, and that's basically the DAFO process. So if you're looking at buying a property in Andalusia in the countryside, then we would check to see if the property had a DAFO, and if not, we'd find out how long it would take to obtain, and we try and tie that in with the completion.
Right, and then what happens at completion? Is that again similar to the UK or better?
Well, basically, once we've prepared our legal report and reported back to clients, we would send them a contract. We take into account the payment they've already made, and we set out various clauses in the contract. We state when completion is going to be made and when exchange of contracts is going to happen. So in effect, once everyone's happy with what they're buying, and the contract is agreed with exchange contracts, pay balance of 10%. So if you've paid a reservation contract, so paid monies under reservation contract, those monies would come off. So you exchange contract, pay 10%, and then we set a date for completion. And exchange of contracts is usually the lawyer can sign on your behalf using the power of attorney, or you can sign yourself, and you would basically, we personally like to see all the monies coming through our client's account, So we can justify that when it comes to the notary completion. And completion is actually at the notary. So whereas the UK completion is over the phone, here in Spain, we actually have to go to the notary in person. If you've granted a power of attorney to your lawyer, then the lawyer can go on your behalf. So I've got a completion coming up on Thursday. The clients are due to come out on Friday, so we'll complete for them and then hand them the keys on Friday. But basically, at completion, we would send we'd send a copy of the contract that we've signed to the notary. We'd send them details of what has been agreed. They prepare a deed, and then we would agree the final figures between the seller's lawyer and the buyer's lawyer. The final figures are agreed. So, for example, if there's a mortgage, then obviously that has to be cancelled at completion. The costs of cancelling at the land registry and notary will retain. So any debts that are there would be taken off. And also, Nigel, if you're buying on a community of owners, then we want to see a certificate from the community confirming that there are no debts with the community. So in effect, we finalise the figures, feed those figures to the notary would set those out in a deed. We go along to completion with the powers of attorney or with the clients. We'd sign the deed, pay over the balance of the purchase price, and then in exchange for that, receive the keys. And that is then completion. So from that date, the buyer owns the property. We would then collect the deed from the notary, pay the notary fees, pay the transfer tax or VAT if you bought a new property, and stamp duty, and then we'd register it in the client's name. And that process takes about 2 months.
Right. Okay. Right. So, any other issues you think we need to cover, or should we now?
So can you say that again?
So I was just checking whether there was anything else you wanted to add before I moved on to the foreign exchange.
Yeah, so basically I'd also recommend that at completion that, or if someone doesn't come out to complete, that they put in place a Spanish will. I'd recommend a Spanish will for Spanish assets and have a UK will for worldwide assets, and worldwide assets and UK assets, except those located in Spain. We recommend that an English will works closely with a Spanish will. If you update your English will, the first clause of an English will is typically, I revoke all former wills, and I suggest you let your English lawyer or UK lawyer, home country lawyer know that you've got a Spanish property, know that you've got a Spanish will in place, and therefore that first clause should be, I revoke all former wills except my Spanish will dated X. So I'd say definitely have a Spanish will in place. Also consider a lasting power of attorney if you're retiring to Spain and intending to live out your last days here. Have a power of attorney in place to a trusted person, to a spouse, so that if anything happens to you, they can manage your affairs. But yeah, generally speaking, Nigel, that's basically all for me.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.